We had a really nice Sangha meeting on Sunday. If you weren't there and you want to know what happened, find somebody who was, and I'm sure they'll be happy to tell you, and we'll send out a few bits and pieces. There's an all-day sitting on Sunday. Everybody's welcome. It's hybrid, and it's a lovely thing to do in the midst of a crazy world, to sit down and breathe with each other and help each other ground and remember what's true. So in a minute, where I'm going to do a little catch up here, because there's some people here who haven't been here all along, and of course, you've always been here all along, because if you're here because you're here. And I was trying to figure out, because Ashley's here, and was one of the wildland firefighter leaders at the Tassajara retreat, and I'm just having a sense of, we did a New Year's Eve fire. So some of you were there, and Brian was there, and Sue was there, and anyway, but mostly it was just the feeling of everybody there together, and how important that is, how important community is, how important understanding and knowing how much we need each other. And how much we need each other, because we are deeply, to use Thich Nhat Hanh's language, interbe. It's like, we may think some of those others out there, if they would just go away or get it together, or whatever we think about other, including probably parts of ourselves, is, as the Dalai Lama says, everybody wants to be happy. And the more we practice together, that is bodhisattva practice. That's what bodhisattvas know, is how deeply interconnected we are. So we are studying the Sandokai, which is a poem from 8th century China, which points to the heart of this tradition. But I think it points to the heart of every tradition, and or every heart, if you follow it all the way through, which I think, that this fundamentally, whatever we think we're doing, in the most fundamental way, how do we be good, kind human beings? That's the other announcement I forgot, is we're doing Bodhisattva precepts tonight afterwards, and you're welcome to stay. Because it does seem to me, the Bodhisattva precepts, or whatever you want to call it, in any tradition or whatever language you come up with, it's about how are we going to take care of this self, and how are we going to take care of the person next to us, and how are we going to take care of the person over there, and how are we going to take care of the earth, and how are we going to take care of all beings, which sounds like an enormous task, but I thought I'd just start with a little poem here, and then we'll chant the Sandokai, because I'm not so sure they're so different. This is called Birdfoot's Grandpa by Joseph Bucock, about practicing a fearless giving. The old man must have stopped our car 24 times to climb out and gather into his hands the small toads, blinded by our lights and leaping, live drops of rain. The rain was falling, a mist about his white hair, and I kept saying, "You can't save them all. Accept it. Get back in. We've got places to go." But leathery hands full of wet brown life knee deep in the summer roadside grass, he just smiled and said, they have places to go to. Okay, that's the Sandokai. No. So, we're gonna chant the Sandokai. It's, in our chant books. We're gonna put it up on the screen. In the chant books, it's on page 8. It's not probably gonna make sense. There may be phrases that pop out at you. We're gonna take up one of the phrases tonight. But mostly it's like a song. It's a beautiful song about gathering up all the little toads on the road and caring for everything, because you know that everything matters and everything is you in some way that is completely inexplicable. And once you know that, your whole life changes, because you know it's not just about you anymore. But it also means take care of yourself. You don't leave anything out. Okay. Harmony of difference and equality.
The mind of the great sage of India is intimately transmitted from west to east, while human faculties are sharp resolved. The way has no northern or southern ancestors. The spiritual source shines clear in the light. The rushing streams flow on in the dark. Seeing of things is surely illusion. According to sameness is still not enlightenment. All the objects of the senses interact and yet do not. Interacting brings involvement, otherwise each keeps its place. Sights vary in quality and form, sounds differ as pleasing or harsh. Refined and common speech come together in the dark. Clear and murky phrases are distinguished in the light. The four elements return to their natures, just as the child turns to its mother. Fire heats, wind moves, water wets, earth is solid. Eye and sights, ear and sounds, nose and smells, tongue and taste. Thus with each and everything, depending on these roots, the leaves spread forth. Trunk and branches share the essence, revered in common, each has its speech. In the light there's darkness, but do not take it as darkness. In the dark there's light, but do not see it as light. Light and dark oppose one another, like the front and back foot in walking. Each of the myriad things has its merit, expressed according to function and place. Phenomena exist, oxen lift it, principle responds, arrow points meet. Hear the words, understand the meaning, do not set up standards on your own. If you do not understand the way right before you, how will you know the path as you walk? Progress is not a matter of far or near, but if you are confused, mountains and rivers block your way. I respectfully urge you to study the mystery. Do not pass your days and nights in vain.
Okay, we are following, I'm following, Ranging Streams Flow in the Dark at the commentary Suzuki Roshi did on this poem. We're on his talk number 10, and it is entitled, Suffering is a Valuable Thing. That good news? And the phrase we're picking up tonight is each of the myriad things has its merit expressed according to function and place. Each thing has its merit. Each person, each frog, each person running around madly trying to gather up and save all the frogs. All the ones who are on the side of the road going, ah. All the ones who don't know and maybe run over without knowing what they're doing. And the road. And the rivers and the rain and the stars and the planets. Everything has its place and its merit. Because everything includes the whole universe. You try to take any one thing out, and the whole universe, I suppose, would collapse, because it is just exactly what it is, because everything came together to create this very moment exactly as it is. And everything's changing, and it's appearing, and it's disappearing, and it's birthing, and it's dying, and it's dynamic, and it's boundless. It's incomprehensible. It's ephemeral. And in case you hadn't noticed, we are all enormously self-centered. I mean, we just, how else are you going to see or know the world except through right here? Except the more you practice and the more you sit down and the more you breathe in and out and the more you ask, what is it? And the more, actually, I think in many ways, it's the more you suffer, the more you feel compassion for yourself. And then maybe you begin to notice that there's suffering that isn't just yours. And then more and more it becomes tender, and more we want to treat each person and thing. We want to bow, we want to care. And that's what's so great about this time, because so many of us have to practice so hard to be kind and caring. Because if you're anything like me, you're probably getting triggered all the time. Like, what? Where's the kindness? But it's just a manifestation of suffering. Not just, I mean, people are getting hurt. People hurting people are hurting. So we find our seat right in the middle of it, with the koan and the question of each of the myriad things has its merit. We couldn't be here without this and without that. And everything that's going to flow out of this, the next moment, is completely interdependent with how we meet this moment and our actions of body, speech, and mind. And the more we know that in Suzuki Roshi's language, he calls it things as it is. Alive. Ephemeral. It's mysterious. It's wondrous. It hurts. You fall down and you get up. And that's just it, moment after moment. Because that's exactly how we wake up, is just this moment. And the Sandokai, some of you may remember, has Ji and Ri. Ji, I think Ji and Ri must be Japanese, I think. But the origin is Chinese, but Suzuki Roshi is teaching this. So Ji is phenomena. Ji is every person, every thought, every being, every grass, every feeling, everything completely unrepeatable. And Ri is the deep, groundless ground or structureless structure that's underneath or behind, or that just is the isness of everything. That you can only taste Think when you stop. Zazen is one access point. Prayer is probably another, whatever tradition, whatever way you come back to the through line, the plumb line, the stillness that's right at the center of everything, out of which everything is being born each moment. And if those words don't make any sense to you, it's okay. They don't make any sense to me either. But I also know that it's true in a way that's beyond conventional truth. And I sense you all have some sense of that too. Suzuki Roshi says, when you see or listen to something, the whole universe is included. When we understand things in this way, we call it the understanding of a big ontological body that includes everything. The basic nature of everything, which is beyond words. We call that understanding truth. Beyond our ideas of good or bad, long or short, right or wrong. And so each thing that appears, each phenomenon that appears is so far beyond. I mean, we because we see and categorize in dualities, and there is right and there is wrong. But each thing appearing each thing appearing has its own merit and place and absolute value that's beyond comparison. But it only expresses what it truly is. When it takes up its functioning in its deepest sense. So when you are completely you, being you in this moment, or when grass is completely being grass, or when the moon rising is completely being the moon rising, everything is exactly in its place and has absolute value. How can you compare a full moon to a half moon? Suzuki Roshi says again. That the Sandokai is talking about the oneness of the particular and the absolute. And it applies to each occasion and to everything. So when you encounter things, you should know that right there is the true teaching revealing itself to you in this moment. It's like, what is it? Who are you? Who are you? And what are you doing here? And what are we doing anyway? We should know how to use things deeply, with respect. To know how to use things is to know the teaching or the way things are functioning. So we bring forward the function of a cup. When you pick up a cup and you have a sense of, oh, there's a cup in my hand. The cup becomes fully a cup, which is really different than, I mean, it's fine, whatever we do with the cup, but when you pick up the cup, with the awareness of the cup in your hand becomes your hand, and the cup becomes the cup, and the tea becomes the tea, and everything becomes alive. That's fundamentally what we're practicing doing, is just being alive here with everything. And when you're alive here with everything, you just want to treat it well. This is to see things as it is. Usually you see one side or the other. You see the background, everything's fine, it's all love, it's all great. Or you see just stuff. But when you pick up a cup and understand that it is the whole world and it's exactly a cup, that's a completely different experience. That's part of what we're practicing when we do all these rituals, it's just, it's like we're not doing the rituals or the bowing or the bells just to do these things. It's because There are moments throughout our lives, and hopefully it happens more when you do ritual, or there's just moments where you just understand the sound of the bell just cuts through everything. It just resonates everywhere. It's so much more than the sound of just one bell. All things are changing and are related one to another, and each thing has its background. Suzuki Roshi says there is a reason why all things are here. Like nothing's a mistake or out of place. You could say this political moment is a real mistake. And I would really like to be able to say that. It seems to be where we are, you know? It's like everything brought us to this moment. So let's meet it. Let's be here. So maybe the koan is, or what we are practicing with all the time is, everything is unique. Each moment is particular, never to be repeated. Each person is that way. The ones we like and the ones that we don't like, and all those moments. And because we're human beings, we get a little self-involved with the uniqueness of our own suffering and our own pain, and what we want and what we don't want. And how do we completely honor that? You know, it's like, how do you take care of this self, but also stay in relationship to everybody and everything else, and understand that we all share a common humanity. There's another Suzuki Roshi. He says, Buddhism does not treat human beings as a special category. I mean, please treat yourself as special, but also know so is everybody else. And please, let's take care of human beings, but also let's know about trees and animals and worms and little frogs jumping across the road. He says it is deluded and egotistical to put human beings into a special category. And yet, it is normal for humans to think that way. Not reflecting within, coming back, but seeking some truth outside themselves. And when you look for the truth out there, or just as self, as this object against the world, or it's all happening out there, and you don't stay in relationship with the world and everything as a swinging gate, he says the background's not big enough. Like you just lost the ground of how big and amazing and wondrous this whole thing is. And the minute we notice that, there's no guilt, there's no shame, there's no like, what's the matter with you? Or where have you been coursing around for the last 30 years of your life, or the last 30 minutes, or you just come back. That's what's so beautiful about this, is it never goes away. It's completely here. You just come back to body and breath. He says you need to find some confidence in yourself. Isn't that great? You need to find some confidence in this self. It's right here. Only when we live like human beings who have a selfish nature are we following the truth in a greater sense, because then we're taking our nature into account. So just take into account all the time that you're self-centered. Yep. Yep, here I am. And then be amazed when suddenly some impulse arises, and some kindness or generosity or softness or some tenderness or some insight. That it's like it's you, but not you. Where did that come from? I was just walking along in my own little self-absorbed thoughts, completely not liking a lot of things and comparing a lot of things. And suddenly it's like the heart and the body. I mean, it can be a practice to be kind, but doesn't it ever amaze you when you just, something kind arises out of you and you don't even know where it happened? Or somebody just does something kind that you didn't expect. It's like, where did that come from? I mean, that's everything having its own merit and its own function, completely expressing itself in its truest, deepest nature. So we should live like human beings in this world. We should not try to live like cats or dogs who have more freedom and are less selfish. I'll tell a story. So when you do you know, these things where you sow them and you take vows and you the first one I did I didn't really know what I was doing and I didn't really believe it anyway. I mean, I don't know what I believe now, but anyway, our first dog, he was a, I've probably heard this story. He was a border collie, and we got him to help him take care of our son, who of course after the first year wasn't so interested in Rocky anymore and just was going on being a teenager, and I was the mother taking care of the dog, and Rocky was kind of neurotic, and I wasn't, and I was really busy, and I wasn't being really nice to Rocky. And Evan, my son, said to me, "Mom, when Rocky dies, will you have treated him as well, will you have loved him as well as you could have loved him in this life?" And I just thought, wow, busted. It's like the world does bust you in ways that's really, I just have never, I think that all the time with each person. When that person dies, well, I have been in relationship with them as lovingly and openly as I could. So then rock became my practice. And when he died, I buried him in my first Rockasoo. Because I felt like he was one of my best teachers. I mean, animals often teach us that. He taught me more about kindness and more about relationship than anything I was capable of knowing at that time. I think I know where he's buried on our property, and I think my little Rockasoo's down there with him. He's just a little dog bodhisattva, you know. But anyway, Suzuki Roshi says, don't try to be a dog or a cat, just be yourself. You know, and all of our complexity, our amazing complexity. Human beings should be put into a cage, a big invisible cage like religion or morality. So that's where I'm going to jump off into here, and then I'm going to do the rest of the phrase I decided on Thursday. But I wanted to, so morality. Morality is not, I mean, the Bodhisattva precepts are not like you're a sinner. They're the Bodhisattva precepts are, and all of these teachings are just mirrors to help us be our best self, to remember kindness, to encourage us. And you may have seen today that the Pope, did you see this? Oh, I'm so glad I brought it. I mean, let me say, any tradition, of course, has its light and its shadow, but I really do believe that the Pope really is like fundamentally. I mean, Saint Francis is Saint Francis, so he issued a statement today that I wanted to, because it's the through line. It's the truth of how do you want to live and how do you want to be in this world. He wants to say a few words to us in these delicate moments in this time. And inviting us to look at the reality of our time, so clearly marked by the phenomena of migration and that it's a decisive moment in history to affirm, not only in his language, faith in God, but always the infinite and transcendent dignity of every human person. It's exactly what the Sandokai says. Each thing has its merit according to function and place. I'm going to skip around. Then he notes that in his tradition, Jesus had the difficult experience of being expelled from his own land and risked to his life and had to take refuge in a society and a culture that was foreign to his own. Which then, in that tradition, Jesus became teaching about loving everyone with a universal love and the permanent recognition of the dignity of every human being without exception. In fact, when we speak of infinite and transcendent dignity, we wish to emphasize that the most decisive value possessed by the human person surpasses and sustains every other juridical consideration that can be made to regulate life in society. It goes beyond public policies, any of that kind of stuff, just the dignity of each human being. Go pull. Sorry. Then he says, just like we might miss what he's saying, I have closely followed the major crisis that is taking place in the United States with the initiation of programs of mass deportations. The rightly formed conscience cannot fail to make a critical judgment and express its disagreement with any measure that tactically or explicitly identifies the illegal status of some migrants with criminality. I mean, of course, he says, take care of your border. I mean, we have to take care of our borders. We have to do all of that, but how we do it? People who have in many cases left their own land for reasons of extreme poverty, insecurity, exploitation, persecution, or serious deterioration of the environment damages the dignity of many men and women and of entire families and places them in a state of particular vulnerability and defenselessness. This is not a minor issue. Need to protect, promote, and integrate the most fragile and unprotected and the vulnerable. Good Samaritan. Remember Good Samaritans? Those are bodhisattvas. Like, be a bodhisattva. How are we going to take care of each other? What are we going to do here? I exhort to all men and women of goodwill not to give in to narratives that discriminate against and cause unnecessary suffering to our migrant and refugee brothers and sisters. And then he calls on the Virgin of Guadalupe to help. I would call on Kuan Yin and Avalokiteshvara to help. We'll call on basic goodness to help. With the awareness that we're all human beings. And how do we keep affirming basic goodness? And I'll go back to then Suzuki Roshi beginning his talk 10, which I've sort of been blithering on about, is suffering is a valuable thing. That somehow basic goodness arises, compassion arises out of not turning away from suffering. And suffering, the root word of suffering or compassion is to suffer with, which is to not turn away from our shared interbeingness. Oh, anyway, thank you for